So, for those of you that don't know, my name is Lorraine Maher, and we're here tonight bringing you another Identity of Alive, part of a series of conversations exploring the social and cultural implications of othering in the arts. For me, that's about creating a dialogue around access, inclusion, and representation. As I said, I'm an artist in residence at Access in Ballymun. I've spent the best part of my life working in arts and social justice. Over the last few years, working a lot in criminal justice. And while I've been doing that, I realized that at the crux of a lot of issues, identity is foremost in people's minds. And so that got me thinking as an artist about the work that I was creating and the work that I wanted to do. And I created a project called #IamIrish, which was about the underrepresentation of mixed race Irish people in Irish representation. I am mixed race Irish. I am from Carrick-on-Suir in County Tipperary in Ireland. Although I live in London now, I work between London and Ireland. And sometimes take my work internationally. But all of my work, I guess, to date, has been around shining a light and give an opportunity to often people and communities that are not given that opportunity. So throughout the last couple of months, there's been so much out there in the media, so much online. And one of the things that really struck me was an article that I saw that was just saying everything that I had been saying. The article was called Structural Racism and How to Embrace Minorities in Irish Music and Art. And I thought, like, this is something that I've been saying for such a long time. And when I was reading this, I was like, yep. Everything that this article was saying was resonating with conversations that I've been having. Conversations I've been having at Access, actually, for the last couple of years. And thinking with Mark O'Brien, who's the director of Access, about how Access as an organisation and how we together as creatives could really create real inclusion, could create real access and real representation for all members of Irish society. So I am really thrilled tonight to be here with the author of that article. I'm going to leave him to actually introduce himself. So over to you.
Thank you, Lorraine. Thank you for that lovely introduction. So yeah, my name is Rob Farhat. I guess you could broadly say I'm a music person. I used to be a musician. I studied classical music quite seriously as a pianist and viola player, and dabbled in conducting a bit as well, but kind of moved away from that in my early 20s and started moving more towards music kind of promotion and management. And so I am now a music programmer, a concert and festival programmer, and an artist mentor, mainly based in London. So I lived in Dublin my whole life up until 3 years ago. I moved to London to kind of get more work opportunities here as doing what I am passionate about. And I guess some of the things we're going to talk about are the reasons that I did wind up leaving Ireland and moving to London, because of the lack of opportunities for people who are trying to do something new in the arts in Ireland, and in particular to represent minorities. My own kind of cultural background is that, well, I'm born and bred Dub and an Irishman, but my heritage is Iranian Armenian. So my parents are both from Iran. My father is Iranian, and my mother is Armenian from Iran. There's a big Armenian community in Iran. And they moved to Ireland in 1979, at a time when no one was moving to Ireland. They actually moved to Belfast. So it was they were definitely, I would say they definitely stood out and did a lot of the hard work of integrating, so that I didn't have to. So I very much had like an Irish or a Western upbringing, I suppose. I've never been to Iran. I don't speak the language, and so yeah, broadly speaking, I had quite a Western kind of upbringing, but definitely kind of felt I had quite a mixed identity as well.
So Rob, when you're in the UK, do you identify as being an Irishman?
Yeah, I would say generally say Irish of Iranian, Armenian heritage. But yeah, first and foremost, I think of myself as Irish for sure.
Do you think, like, so you know, as someone who's mixed, like I'm Irish, and I feel kind of clear that I'm Irish. My dad was Nigerian, but I'm Irish, and that feels like the first thing I want to say to people, because there's something that comes with that I feel joyous about. And you know, when I think about Irish arts and Irish culture, there's something immediately that makes it accessible, because I know as a child growing up, the house we grew up in, there was poetry, there was storytelling, there was singing, there was always drama, you know. And I remember even putting on little shows when I was a kid, but I never actually identified myself as an artist. I never, I would have never even aligned what was happening at home with what was happening in the wider world. Like what we saw on stage, the music that we listened to on the radio. It's funny because the other day, my partner was saying to me, you know, what shows did you watch when you were growing up? And I was thinking, like, actually, we had the TV, the RTE1 was the only channel. We didn't have any other channels. And even looking at it, you know, when I think of how far modern technology has come, you couldn't really see it sometimes within the haze of what was there. But what we did do every day is we listened to the radio. We listened to the Reardons at 1 o'clock every day. It was like, you know, that was our soap. We were hooked on it. But we listened to music. Music was definitely part and parcel of who we were. Every occasion that there was music. And when I think about cultures throughout the world, something that's at the heart of that is music. It's there. It's really obvious. It's really evident. So when we're looking at access to music, it feels ironic to think that with so much music in the world, so much music in our homes, on the street, on the radio, on TV, with so much access to music, that broadly across the world, when we think about Ireland and we think about music and musicians, it's a particular type of music.
Yep.
So tell us what your thoughts are around that, Rob.
Yeah, well, I mean, I can say a lot about that. I mean, I think first of all, I think our music is so part and parcel of Irish culture. We have a very rich musical history, but I also think it's somewhat seen as, maybe because so many people do play an instrument, or music is a big part of their lives in Ireland. It's seen more as a hobby than as a job, and that's kind of reflected in how it's supported by the state and by kind of cultural institutions. But then kind of internationally, I think Irish music is maybe stereotyped a little bit. I think it's people obviously think of Irish trad, and Irish traditional music is wonderful and it's very rich, but maybe the version of it that's kind of most thought of internationally is your river dance or whatever it's and there's obviously a lot more variety to Irish traditional music than what's kind of put first in at the forefront internationally. And not that I have anything against river dance. I think river dance is a brilliant piece of work. Also, then kind of outside of our traditional music, I guess Ireland has been kind of stereotyped by stadium rock bands and singer-songwriters. So it maybe doesn't help that one of the biggest bands in the world, U2, is Irish, because then people think, okay, Ireland's a small country and they produce this massive rock band, stadium rock band, U2, and that they kind of assume that that's what Ireland is good at, whereas we're actually good at so many different kinds of music. And in particular, recently with the growing minority population in Ireland, we've got that's really kind of making the Irish music scene a lot more varied and richer. We have an incredible hip hop scene, R&B. We've got a great underground electronic music scene, and the rest of the world is only kind of starting to catch up on that now. I go to kind of showcase festivals, showcase kind of industry festivals, and when I started working in the music industry about 6 or 7 years ago, there was always an assumption that, well, if there's an Irish band coming, there must be a rock band or some guy with an acoustic guitar or whatever. But now the variety of Irish music is starting to get its due, and yeah, it's very encouraging.
Rob, when you've been speaking to people outside of Ireland about Irish acts that you might be representing or trying to bring abroad, what's people's what's their reaction when they see the artists that you're talking about and the kind of music that you're talking about?
I think that, well, it depends where you go. I actually find that in London, I think, because London's so multicultural. So I'm based in London, and London is so multicultural that people are used to the idea that you will have a mixed heritage artist from a Western country. So I don't think there's and say for myself as well, you asked me what do I say? How do I describe myself in London? And when I say I'm Irish, I don't get that many puzzled looks. Even though I don't look stereotypically Irish. With the artists that I work with, I think that it's that kind of assumption that an Irish musician is going to be white and is going to play a certain kind of music that is receding, at least in the UK. In America, that's maybe kind of less so. I think especially because let's just say the Irish American community is a little bit, not just a little bit, a good bit behind in terms of the kind of modernization that's happened in Ireland, socially and culturally. So I think there's still a lot of work to do there.
I mean, I have to agree, but I think that often that's what fourth and fifth generation Irish that have never been in Ireland, and actually they feel so far removed from what Ireland is, who we are as people, what we're about these days. And funny enough, they're often those that shout the loudest about us not really being Irish.
Absolutely.
So when I was just thinking, I always get excited when I see a minority artist in an Irish space in London, even because for so many years I didn't feel like they were my spaces. I wouldn't have even thought about the work that I was creating until I think it was probably 2016. I brought an exhibition that I was working on, #I'mIrish, to the London Irish Centre. And I know before that certainly wasn't on the walls. Now I know, in Access and Ballymun, I know that they've had people from across the world showcased in the space since the spaces existed. And I think that in Ireland, they're, although still very far behind, I know as a woman of colour in Ireland, I know that I can access somewhere where I'm going to hear music that I want to hear or see art that I want to see. But in London, if I want to see Irish artists, they tend to be a particular type of Irish artist. What's your thoughts around that?
I think that, again, the establishment is always slow to catch up on evolving culture, so you look at the kind of the typical promoters or venues in London or in any kind of major city outside of Ireland. They're going to gravitate, they gravitate towards the Irish bands that they think of as being part, the kind of what we talked about before, the kind of stadium rock, the guitar bands or the singer-songwriters. And so it kind of it almost takes, but it's, the music industry is so small that personal relationships are so make such a big difference, and it only, actually I find it only takes one or two links, personal links between London and Ireland to change that. So like yourself, bringing over that exhibition to Irish Arts Centre, there are now a bunch of Irish people working in the music industry in London who are really evolving that perception of what Irish music is over here. Not just myself, but there's people working in management and in record labels who are then, using their kind of, their knowledge of how far Irish music has come to really kind of update how Irish music is perceived in the UK. And I think that, that will then, like London is such a kind of influential city in terms of music trends and tastes, that will then start that will gradually permeate through the rest of the kind of international music scene. But yeah, it is still early days.
Yeah, I mean, my thoughts around, I've got so many thoughts around that actually, because I've been, when I first started my residency, it's got a bursary opportunity via the Arts Council in Ireland to really look at this, which was exciting in itself, because that's a commitment to saying, this is an artist that we want to support. And I started, and my starting point was the Irish census, and a real frustration of othering within the Irish census. And people are probably getting sick of hearing me talk about this now, actually, because, on the Irish census form, we've got white Irish, white traveller, white other, black Irish, black African, black other, black Caribbean, and any other kind of black is completely out of the picture. We've got Asian Chinese, or any other Asian. And then we've got other, which includes me being mixed, but I don't feel like I want to be other. I'm kind of sick of being other. And then when I started looking at the UK census and the States and everywhere else, actually Irish across the globe equals white. Yeah. And I feel massively frustrated by that, massively frustrated, because, and some people might say it's because minority ethnic communities in Ireland are relatively new. And I would like to think that of myself as kind of fresh and new, but the reality is that, I've been around for over 50 years and there's people around that could be my parents that are in Ireland that have been there for years. So it feels like, when we're thinking centuries behind, like we know about Rachel Baptiste, she's written into articles in Ireland in the 1700s, that she was singing in Ireland in 1752, I think it was. Now I'm sure that there was others, but she just feels really prominent because that's since the 1700s. There's been a black woman going around concert halls in Ireland singing. This is not new. This was centuries ago, and the world has still seen us as like monotone, and seeing the value of what we bring as a one cap fits all. And even within all of that, there is also a perception, even when we're looking at traditional Irish music. Like for me, I was gonna share a kind of a personal moment of singing. I was being in pain and singing, and the songs that I sing are Irish songs because that's what I know. That's what I was taught. As a child, they're my go-to. That's inherent. That's in my veins. That's who I am. That's what I bring. And yet, we when we look globally, we see Ireland in a really flat way. And I just think so what do you think that we can do? What do you think we can do? Or actually, maybe we need to step even back behind that. We'll step back. We'll come back to that. We'll come back to that question. So one thing that I've seen recently, and Mark and I at Access have had these conversations a lot recently, because Access has been great. They're one of the few organizations. Now, I'm not even going to say few organizations because I can't claim to know them all. And I'm sure there's others out there who are doing, I know that there's lots of organizations doing an amazing job, but I know certainly at Access, it's one of those organizations that puts their money where their mouth is and really develops. And I'm talking from a personal experience that really wants to embrace a richness within the artists and the pool of artists that they work with. And yet they have all these opportunities for bursaries, but the people that they may want to reach are not applying for these roles. And in the last couple of weeks, I've been contacted by 4 different people who are saying, I have these opportunities and putting these opportunities out there, but I'm not, I'm putting the call out, but people are not coming back. People are not they're not applying for this. They're not coming forward. And I'm going back to what you said a little while ago about personal relationships, because personal relationships are really important. But what happens when people don't have those personal relationships is people often end up, you know, advertising within circles that they know. You know, we go in this kind of circle. Go in this circle. So what do you think as an industry, what can we do? How can we help people to connect? How can we help those dots?
I think I think that's especially true in Ireland, where communities are quite tight knit, and you know, social circles are quite tight knit, and which is great when you're part of those communities because you feel very supportive by those around you. But for a newcomer to Ireland or you know, a relative outsider, it makes it quite hard to feel a part of that community, you know. And so I think too often in the arts, opportunities are maybe not advertised widely enough, or you know, are spread through word of mouth, or are, you know, or not even advertised, and are done through just personal connections. So just putting an advert out there, you know, isn't enough. You know, you need to actually actively engage with communities, you know, and you know, like what Axis is doing here with yourself is, you know, they're giving you their platform to then also engage with other artists of ethnic minorities, and so that it's not just that you know, they're putting a call out, you know, and hoping that people will come to them. They're you know, they're working with someone like you who is then actively engaging with people from minority kind of backgrounds and communities. So yeah, I think so I see that happening now, actually, in fairness, you know, on the back of, you know, even before I put out that article, I have to say the Arts Council in Ireland for the last year or so has been doing some really good work in terms of developing an equality and diversity policy, and they've recently had like a series of consultations with artists from kind of underrepresented backgrounds. So it is happening, yeah, but you need to actively engage. You know, it's not good enough to just say, okay, we've got this, you know, we're putting a call out, you know, and then assume that the people will come, because too often, you know, I think like this, when you know, if you're minority or any sort of, you know, person from any sort of underrepresented background, you know, this conversation shouldn't, you know, these kind of conversations need to be holistic. You know, we can't, you know, there's, you know, race is just one aspect of how artists are left out of the kind of arts kind of establishment. So yeah, it, you know, this perception kind of gradually gets created that, okay, well, even, you know, there are opportunities there, but they're not for me. You know, they're there for a certain type of artist that fits into, you know, this kind of like establishment kind of category, and so those people don't even apply, you know. So yeah, yeah, I mean, that's a very long-winded way of saying that, you know, people at the helm of kind of establishment institutions who have opportunities to give, they need to actively engage and not just, you know, assume that, you know, the artists will eventually come.
I think just to add to that, Rob, I think there is also something about the value of the art form, because people often think when there is, you know, when they see something, they see a call, even if someone is calling for someone who's interested in, you know, a producer of electronic music. There are people that are making music that feel like, you know, they're making music in their bedrooms, or they're creating their own studios, because often they feel like the work that they're creating is not going to be valued in the same way that other music is, because again, going back to what we see as being mainstream. And you know, and so it's almost like there's, like, for me anyway, I have two different opportunities, two different experiences when I come to Ireland, because I go to Ireland and I listen to the music that I listen to in London. I dance to the music that I listen to in London. I'm in those same kind of environments, but in some ways that's an environment that is not inclusive, because there's not people, some people don't know about it. They don't even know that exists. And so it feels like that there is still an underground music scene in Ireland, slightly differently to the underground music scene in the UK.
Sure. And
I do wonder about how we create those steps for people. How do we ensure that people are feeling like that is a space for them? Because, you know, from the artists, I know certainly the people that I spoke to last week, they certainly have got a want. They are working in a kind of way that they're trying to increase representation. They definitely want to increase inclusion. But one of the thoughts, and this comes from, again, conversations that we have at Access all the time, is about not creating opportunities for the sake of it, not being, you know, not wanting the token person, but actually really wanting to be representative of the community that we see around us. And I'm just kind of, I'm thinking about like just inclusion. Like for you, what was your kind of personal experience as a musician in Ireland, and thinking about some of the musicians that you've represented and trying to climb through the ranks? Because it seems to me that in Ireland, as artists, people can go to a certain level, but actually, in order to be valued as part of a wider offer, people are leaving. And I think that there's something lost in that. And then often, once people have really made it, then they can come back and they might get the big gig. But that's still not happening.
Yep.
Yeah. What you think?
I mean, again, there's a lot to unpack there. I mean, I think for, you know, the experience I had with the artists that I worked with in Ireland, in particular, I think my RT artists was that, first of all, there's a much higher kind of minimum standard, you know, when you're starting off, you know, like, you know, you look at, you know, Irish festival lineups, Irish, you know, gig lineups, and you know, let's just say, I guess the kind of mediocre to, you know, the filler acts tend to always be white men, you know, for the most part. And so there, whereas like to start getting onto that kind of ladder as a ethnic minority artist, you have to be brilliant, you know. There is a double standard there. Not to say that there aren't some brilliant white male artists. There absolutely are. But when you're starting off as an ethnic minority artist, you know, you're looking for opportunities and you're being told, oh, you're not quite ready yet, you know, you don't quite fit the bill. And then you're looking around at the rest of the line and you're saying, well, what, you know, how are these other kind of, you know, middle of the road artists getting opportunities while I'm not, you know? So there is definitely a higher kind of minimum standard. And then once you do start getting onto that kind of ladder, then what you also find is that you start getting lots of opportunities, but you get these kind of tokenistic opportunities. So so you might get asked to play, you know, a song as part of a wider gig, or you get featured here and there, but you're not necessarily given your own kind of platform, you know, in your own right. And so then there's actually a lower ceiling to those opportunities as well, you know. And then you find that, well, you just kind of have to look abroad to start, you know, actually progressing beyond that. You know, you kind of become like this, you know, biggish fish in a small pond, but it's not really enough to sustain a career. And you have to, you know, and so the only way to keep progressing is to look abroad. And that's why so many Irish artists do wind up having to leave. I think, I mean, and you know, don't get me wrong, there's a lot of value in getting experience outside of Ireland anyway, you know, like meeting new musicians, you know, and learning from other cultures. And certainly, I mean, moving to London is a very kind of, you know, typical move for Irish arts workers like myself and Irish artists. And there's, you know, there's the scene here is really rich and varied, and there's a, you know, there are a lot of reasons to move here in their own right. But I think, you know, if we did more to support Irish artists at that kind of like early level in Ireland, you know, there might not be as much of a need to look abroad, you know. And and you know, to make more connections then for Irish people for Irish artists to get opportunities abroad without having to leave, you know.
And what would that look like for you when you say support artists? What would that look like?
Yeah, so I certainly think Irish artists, we across the board, we could do with more support for Irish artists at a kind of at an early to mid-level kind of stage in their careers. You know, like Irish arts funding opportunities tend to be quite weighted to kind of later in one's career, and to kind of more, I guess, like established kind of art forms and organizations. So so supporting artists at that grassroots level through, like in the UK, there are hundreds of what we call talent development programs that support, you know, that give artists kind of mentoring and connections at an early stage in their careers. We don't really have in music, in Irish music, we don't really have any of those kind of structured talent development programs. There's a couple in Belfast. Great, yeah, exactly. Brilliant. Yeah, so there's a couple in theatre and in visual arts, but in music there's pretty much nothing. So stuff like that would be very helpful. And I think just giving, you know, increasing the amount of funding that goes directly to grassroots and kind of early stage artists. You know, I think it's not enough to just kind of assume that the established arts organizations will kind of, you know, progress their kind of output, and you know, then the money will kind of, you know, the funding opportunities will trickle down from the existing, you know, established kind of arts scene. You know, funding and opportunities need to be given directly to artists at that grassroots level, you know, and so that they can, you know, especially, you know, with minorities, so that they can represent themselves in their own way, and you know, in their own spaces, and so it's not like they're having to fit in to this kind of established an establishment institution. You know, that's, to a certain extent, that's where, so in the UK, the conversation, shall we say, and the policy around inclusivity has been around for a lot longer. You know, I mean, obviously multiculturalism is you know, has been in, you know, has been a part of a major part of British and particular English and London kind of culture for a long time. So these policies and this conversation has been around in the UK for a good while, you know, whereas in Ireland it's only really getting started now. In England, there is extensive policy around inclusion and, you know, opportunities for minority artists. I find that they can be quite tokenistic because they're really kind of tinker around the edges and are about, you know, trying to encourage established arts organizations to meet certain quotas, you know, and so they're just kind of trying to fit minority and other excluded artists into a kind of, you know, the establishment, and, you know, what it is still a kind of structurally racist system, you know. And so rather than giving, I would like to see more, you know, in Ireland, as Ireland starts to develop these policies, I want to see funding opportunities given directly to the artists and to the kind of grassroots organizations that are supporting minority artists, you know.
And what do you think that we can do? Like, because I feel like that there's a lot of bias involved. Yeah. You know, like when we're thinking, and even when we're thinking about the music that's been created by people who identify as being from Black and ethnic minority communities, there is, you know, when you talk about particular artists, people presume that they must be into hip hop, or they must be, you know, into grime or drill, and actually, you know, there's so much to unpack in that. That's it. I mean, the art that minority artists are making are, you know, is really complex. You know, it's only natural, you know, when you've got this kind of mixed identity of being Black or brown, you know, of any sort of non-Western heritage, but growing up in Ireland, you know, that's complicated, you know, and you know, that's going to translate into very complex forms of music and art that doesn't fit into any one box, you know. And so whereas again, the kind of establishment, you know, music industry, arts institutions tends to like to box art off into
into kind of easy to categorize kind of corners, you know. And so, you know, I found with some of the musicians I worked with, you know, say, you know, the artists that came from African heritage, you know, actually, you know, once we started getting opportunities for them in kind of established festivals and institutions, they wanted to hear what they thought of as their most African type of music, you know, whereas actually the artists were creating music that straddled multiple worlds, and you know, where they talked about their experience as someone of African heritage in Ireland. And so you know, these are, you know, artists should be encouraged to express themselves, you know, in all their complexity, rather than, you know, trying to kind of fit into a stereotype of what an African artist should sound like, you know.
No, but that's so interesting in itself, because even when we think about foods, that happens with foods. Like when you look at chicken tikka masala, is not an Asian dish that people have in most Asian countries. It's that's something that appeases a Western palate, and it feels like it's the same thing that happens when we come to arts and culture, that there is an expectation that once a door is open for you, that you have to fit this label. So how do you think that we can create visualization of people without continually stigmatizing people?
Well, I mean, for one thing I want to say is I give our audiences a lot of credit. I find audiences are really open-minded these days, you know. I mean, young and old, but I think, you know, especially you know, the younger generation is really open to hearing music that doesn't fit into, you know, neat labels, and you know, the kind of, you know, I mean, the internet has had a really detrimental effect on artists' income from their recorded music, but it has definitely broadened listeners' horizons in terms of the kind of music that's on offer to them. And so I really wish that institutions would give their audiences actually a bit more credit as well. You know, there's kind of an assumption that our audience will want to, you know, hear, you know, a certain, you know, kind of, you know, type of music, or you know, if we promote an artist who is of African or Asian heritage, they'll want to hear music that they think of as African, you know, whereas actually I think audiences are really open-minded these days. I've actually forgotten what your question was. Sorry.
No, it's fine. It's fine. I want someone's asked a question, so
sure.
I'm just gonna put the question to you, and then I'll respond. Stephen asks the question: do you think some ethnic minority music or art forms aren't allowed to flourish due to pressure from within their own communities, as the arts aren't seen as a good job?
Well, I mean, I can't speak for the artists from those communities. I mean, there is an element of that. I mean, I don't think it's unique to ethnic minority communities at all. I think, you know, that was true of Irish families probably up until quite recently as well. You know, and even still. So I think there's always a bit of pressure from artist families or you know, close communities to get a real job or whatever, you know. And you know, I think it comes from for the most part, it comes from a place of care and concern that, you know, because being an artist is tough, you know, it's tough financially, it's tough mentally, and so yeah, there is a bit of that for sure. Our careers in the arts taken seriously enough? I think it varies from family to family and community to community. You know, I think, but you know, I think in Ireland, you know, we definitely have work to do for the kind of wider society to take being an artist more seriously as a job, you know, and not as some kind of hobby, you know. And it's like, you know, the government, you know, the Irish government likes to, you know, they like to promote Irish culture, you know, as something, you know, that brings in, you know, tourism, and you know, as you know, likes to, use its cultural capital abroad, but it doesn't quite put its money where its mouth is when it comes to we have the lowest arts funding per capita in Western Europe, I think through more genuine support for artists at a funding level, and then also at an educational level, making access to music lessons, art classes more widely available, I think that will really help change perceptions.
Yeah, I mean, I think that education has a big role within that.
Yeah.
My own kind of take on that, when we're thinking about being allowed to flourish, I think that in itself, I don't know where that kind of sits with me. I mean, I think that I acknowledge that for some families, the arts is not something, that's valued, but I think that that's because the systems in place are not putting a value on the arts. And so, that's a much it's a much wider thing than just the kind of nuclear family. I think that when we think about education and how we look at the arts and how we add value to the arts, and the arts is a service that has been there in every traumatic situation that's ever happened across the globe. There has been some artist that has responded to that in some kind of way. Do you think that like throughout the I don't even have language for it anymore, Rob, but we've all been at home, packed in. Live art is really under threat right now. But do you think that this new digital connection that we're finding, do you think that that's created more opportunity, or do you see that as a plus or a minus to young Irish artists?
Well, there's definitely been some opportunity there. I mean, in terms of reaching, artists have been forced to find new ways to reach audiences, firstly, I actually want to say that, I think this has been such a traumatic year for everyone, and I think for any artists who are watching or whatever, no one should feel like they, should feel any kind of that they should feel any pressure, put any pressure on themselves to have kind of found innovative new ways to get their art out there, or to reach new audiences this year, because it's been tough enough, for a lot of people, trying to make ends meet this year. So on top of that, to figure out an entirely new way to create art, and to reach audiences is, no one should feel kind of guilty or under any pressure for not having done so. But yeah, I mean, it's kind of, I guess, it's kind of in a way, it's kind of exposed how reliant artists are on income from live performance, and so in the music industry, people have been complaining about the lack of income from Spotify and other streaming services for years, but now, it's really come to the fore now, because artists' main source of income has been gone, like the model of how recorded music is released and consumed is clearly broken and not working for artists. And while there has been, it has definitely opened avenues for artists to reach more audiences online, I can't say it's been a altogether positive experience for most artists, to be honest. And I really sympathize with them, and that's why we really need to again look at our funding models. And I think I do think it's the last few months has helped, has made people appreciate how much they miss the arts, and how much they miss that like actual live experience, and I think, I mean, like the National Campaign for the Arts in Ireland has been doing great work for years to try and increase arts funding, but I think, if anything, this crisis has really hammered home how much we need to support artists more in Ireland, and I hope the powers that be will respond to that.
And I just have to add to that, and you alluded to it earlier on, Rob, when we're thinking about artists that come from Black and minority ethnic communities, it's really important to kind of think intersectionally, because when we want to create real representation, not just actually of, because what's interesting, and I think it's worth a mention, when we talk about minority ethnic communities here in London, Irish people are a minority ethnic community, and I think that's lost on a lot of people. When we speak about Black and ethnic minority people in Ireland, we're talking about everyone, because that's who we are, that's how we're seen. And I think that it is really important that we continue to support the arts, that we continue to support individuals within the arts, but I'm just thinking, I'm kind of giggling to myself about the fact that we're all minority, we're a minority when we think about the island. But when we think about the systems that are in place in Ireland, when we're looking at music, what's your hopes for that, Rob? What's your hopes for the music industry? And for what gives to the kind of wider Irish community?
I mean, firstly, I'd say I've been very encouraged by the kind of self-reflection and general response in the Irish music and wider arts community to, in the aftermath of George Floyd's tragic murder and the Black Lives Matter movement and general anti-racism kind of conversations that have been happening since then. And I do think there has been some genuine kind of soul searching going on over the last few months. I see, I think, when I compare the situation in Ireland in terms of, the kind of, how far behind Ireland is in terms of embracing minorities in the arts, it is much further behind a country like the UK, but I'm also I feel more hopeful that things are moving in the right direction and that progress will be made quite much more quickly. Actually, you look at how far Ireland has progressed on other social issues over the last couple of decades with gay marriage and women's rights to choose, and I am quite hopeful that those kind of changing attitudes will help address problems with structural racism as well. That's across the board, not just in the arts. But what I hope is for some genuine representation in the art scene, and so that's not just the existing organizations, programming Black or brown artists here and there and saying job done. You need to, like Access has done with yourself, actually give the platforms over, and allow the artists and the kind of grassroots collectives and organizations that support them to create their own work, and to perform and to create work on their own terms, and not to try and fit into an establishment institution's kind of way of doing things. I mean, how that happens is very complicated, and in that article you mentioned that I wrote, I have a kind of series of proposals that for like arts organizations and the Arts Council and educational institutions to start really kind of genuinely engaging with and representing ethnic minorities, because making small changes here and there isn't really going to do it. You know, you need to do the actual work, and it does mean giving away some of what you have as an institution. Taking some control away from yourself. You know, if you're the artistic director or any sort of head of an arts institution, you need to accept that, okay, as a white person, you are not actually best placed to represent minority culture. The artist is. So you need to actually just give your platforms over to those artists, rather than being the one to kind of decide, okay, this is how I want a minority artist to perform in my space. I think that's, but I mean, I could talk for hours about it, really, but that's the main kind of crux of it, really.
I mean, I am interested in just kind of hearing you speak about some of those other, because for me they're gifts that you're giving to people when you're proposing ways of working. Because I'm thinking, like, particularly when we're looking at music is like an international language. You see newborn, well, at an extreme when I'm looking at newborns, but certainly, my grandchildren, before they can speak, they're moving to music, they're rocking, they're smiling. It just touches the soul. Like, music is something that connects us. You don't have to even actually, I remember when I was younger, I worked with 2 deaf artists who rocked more than anybody, because they felt the vibrations. Music just connects us. It just brings us together. It does something for us. So when we're looking at organizations, when we're thinking about integration of our local communities, when we're thinking about representation, I'm always saying to people, like, it's important that we're bringing people in, but it's also important that you're thinking about why you want to do this, why you should be doing this. That's really important. And I think for me, kind of just a real gift to people is to just offer people the opportunity to look at the skill and the person before the color, the language, the ability. Look at what they're bringing to the table. Look at how you can help that to flourish. So when you're thinking about somebody that comes from like a rural place in Ireland, and somebody that comes from like a nice urban environment, I don't know why I just used nice, actually, because they're both beautiful. Sure. But when you're looking at the different kind of environments, what's the advice that you would give to arts organizations in both of those kind of environments to ensure that they are representative of their local communities, whatever and whoever makes up that community?
Yeah, I mean, well, I think I would say, you need to be willing to get outside your comfort zone, and acknowledge that, for any curator or artistic director, you're going to have blind spots, in your kind of sphere of reference, or the kind of your awareness of the arts or music scene around you, and so acknowledging that and listening to what other people have to say. So bringing, if arts organizations have boards, to bring in people from minority and communities, and to really just kind of, I really think the first step is acknowledging that you actually have more to learn, always as a artistic director or curator. But and as you said before, it's these systems of oppression are intersectional, and so this is not just a issue of race. And I do really think that when it comes to accessing the arts, class and wealth is a major barrier, and that of course intersects with race. But I think so like for someone like myself, I never had any, because I come from a relatively affluent background, I never had any issue accessing arts, because my parents had the means to send me to music classes, etc. And so a lot of stuff we've talked about are really for when an artist has already started a career, and you know, it's, you know, making sure that, you know, at a higher level, you know, the arts and the music scene is representative, but, you know, to even ensure that we have like a representative kind of body of artists in the first place, you know, we need to make sure that people of all backgrounds, ethnic, gender, class and wealth have access to arts, and that comes through again through education and through community engagement and funding.
And I think it's really important that at those stages that we're really representative of the genres of music that we're offering, and that we're showing value to that from, you know, when children are in primary schools, that there is value to kind of, you know, global arts and culture, that there is that kind of access. And I would say, just as we're finishing up tonight, one of the things that I think that's just really important is thinking of, for all of us, is thinking about who we are as allies. And it's about that introduction, because I know certainly for me, when I first got into the world of the arts, I knew that it was about who you know, rather than sometimes what you know. And I've decided from a very young age that I wanted to be that person that brought people with me everywhere that I went, and in fact placed people before me in some places. And I would say to people that it's really important that we're opening doors for people, and sometimes it's important that it's even more important that we go through the door with them and ensure that they're comfortable in the environment that they're in. And sometimes that means pulling out the seat for people, and sometimes that means actually giving them your seat. And so I'm going to finish up with that tonight. For me, my motto is always each one teach one. And Rob, thank you for all that you've taught me this evening. Thank you for all that you've taught everybody that's listening this evening. I've really enjoyed talking to you, and I know this conversation that we're having is going to be the first of many, because as I said to you, like for me, I have been involved in London and setting up, you know, many kind of artist development programs, and it's important, I think, that some of that is replicated at home, because there really is a need. And so, you know, I'm going to be calling on you for that. And I think it's important that anybody else that's out there that's working in this field, it's important that we connect and that we remember, you know, that it's down to us to be bringing people along. And that doesn't mean that it's down to you to represent everybody, because, you know, sometimes it's hard enough representing yourself. But you know, when we are making our music, it's about kind of just owning who we are as creatives that are Irish, and just, you know, doing a great job in whatever that we're doing and continuing to represent. Thank you everybody that's been at home this evening, that's joined the conversation. We haven't had loads of questions this evening, and I think that maybe because people were just busy listening, but I'm delighted to have had everybody with us this evening. I'm going to be back next week, Wednesday, with another live chat, looking at identity and othering. And actually, we didn't speak loads tonight, actually, about identity, but it's safe to say that Rob and I are Irish creatives that are just continuing to do what we do. And I think that that's the thing with the arts, that as artists, we do what we love. And going back to the question earlier about, you know, whether that sometimes families stop us, I think that when you love something, and most of us that are creatives, it's just inherent in who we are and in what we do. And even for people that go and they, you know, that do lots of other jobs, they'll find some kind of creativity in what they do, because it's part of who we are. And I think as an Irish community, we're a community of creatives. We're just a community that is a community to be proud of. So when we think about representation, it's really important for me that all members of Irish society are seen and represented worldwide for the greatness that we bring as a community of creatives. So that's all for me tonight. Good night to you, and I'll be back next week. Bye.
Thanks so much, everyone. Yeah, thanks, Lorraine. It's been a pleasure.